What's up guys, Ryan here from Teknada, and today I'm going to show you how I make my template in Ableton Live. Now templates are really important because it really helps workflow, and it's really nice to get in the groove when you want to start making music and you don't have to keep setting up channels. You just load up the project and you're just ready to let your creativity flow. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this is more or less what it should look like when you open up Ableton. I like to start by changing the BPM to the type of music that you typically like to make. So if you want to make trap or dubstep, you might want to set that to 140 or 150. I'm usually making house music, so I'll put that at 125. And we just want to start with just a MIDI track here. And first I'll just put that in a group by pressing Ctrl G, and you can rename that group drums. And right here I set my default audio and MIDI tracks to automatically start with a compressor and an EQ on there. So how you do that is you just go into your audio effects, you would add your compressor through here, and then you can go to your EQ and add your EQ on there. I don't typically do anything too much to them, but you could set like a default ratio or threshold or whatever you see fit. And how you do that once you have the track set up is you right click on the MIDI track and you do set as default MIDI track, and once you do that, every time you create a new MIDI track, it will automatically start with these two plugins on there or whatever plugins you decide to put. And I have that both set for MIDI and audio, so if I press Ctrl T and put it on there, you can see the audio track automatically starts with these. So that's just a small tidbit of information. So now that I have this MIDI track, I'm going to first start and label this one kick. And I typically like to add a drum bus, or a drum rack rather, on all of my tracks. So you're just going to go to Instruments and Drum Rack. And for all my drums, I typically work in Midi. I know a lot of people like to work in audio, but Midi, being that each one of these little cells has a simpler on there, you can have a lot more versatility with how you sculpt the sound, whether you're fading it out or start time. And it's a little bit easier for me to work in on MIDI than in audio by just dragging the samples up into the timeline here, but you can do whatever you're comfortable with. So now that I have this kick track, some people like to do a kick top and bottom, so I can do that just so you have the versatility. So I'll duplicate that kick track, rename this kick top, likewise kick bottom. And to rename, it's just Control R, or you can right click and just do rename there. All of the quick keys will be here for really helpful actions that you're going to make in Ableton. So after you have both those tracks, then I'm going to just duplicate that a couple more times. And if you want to, you can group within a group in Ableton 10 and 11. That's one of my favorite features, so now I can just call this kick. So if you want to just process both of your kicks independently of the rest of your drums, then this is a really helpful way to do that. So now I'm going to put a drum bus on my kick group. So if you want to add some extra crunch, I'll just put that dry wet down to 0 just so it doesn't affect anything right now. And I could even copy that onto the drum group too. Again, at 0 dry wet, so once you want to start adding it, you can just bring that in. Or you could put it at 100 and then just disable it for now. And also on my kick group and my drum group, I might also add a glue compressor. And these are really nice because it really helps glue your drums together, makes them sound very cohesive. And if you have a couple kick layers, it really kind of blends the two kicks together nicely if you're working with like a subby bottom kick and then like a clicky top kick. And typically I'll put the glue compressor first before the drum bus. And I'll start with both of those disabled. Alright, so now we have the drums and the kick, top and bottom. Now after that, I'm going to add some other instruments that I typically use, such as a clap. And you can make a couple different claps in here. If you really want to set yourself up, you might want to do a clap main. A clap tight. And a clap wide. And then you might want to pan these a little bit. Now some people will put the same clap on these and then just pan them hard left and hard right. It really just depends on what samples you're working with and what kind of feel you want, but I would definitely have a clap main that's relatively centered and then some other accent claps that make it feel a lot more full and have those panned a little bit left and right. Then if you could tell, all of my groups or all of my audio and MIDI tracks that I add are starting on -10. I like to start them at -10, or you could do like -5, just so it's not clipping right off the master, because you really don't want to have to turn the master down. If anything's too loud, then you can just easily bring it up. You have 10 decibels of headroom there to work with. Some people even go as low as -20, but I think -10 is a pretty good medium. And likewise with the kicks, if you really wanted to, you can group those, call those hats, or excuse me, claps. And the reason I like to group them independently is so you can kind of just minimize those groups and keep them nice and organized. Now here we can add same thing, but with hi-hats. So we'll do CL hat, closed hat, and I might even do the same thing with the claps, where I have a main, duplicate that. Maybe do like a alternate closed hat alt. I won't always do this, but it's nice to have the availability to. And again, just because I'm duplicating the track, it automatically comes with these plugins here, and I like to use the drum rack instead of just a single sampler, so you can put multiple samples in here and then just kind of preview them. So when I'm sample digging, I'll typically go through and find like 5, maybe 10 hi-hats that I like, throw them in there, and then as I'm playing the track, I can just like arrow through in the MIDI clip and just preview which one that I want in context with the rest of the song, rather than just listening to them independently. And just like the other drums, I'll group those. Closed hats. And I'll duplicate this a couple more times. And now I'll do the open hats. And you could always rename these to whatever you like. Group those, call those open hat, or OP hat for short. And actually I'm going to put this open hat group ahead of the closed hats, because that's typically the way that I'll build my drums. Now we can rename this one toms. I'll typically just put all my toms into one group, so I don't usually make several groups, but you can split that up if you want to have like several layers for your toms. So I'll have that there. Can name this percussion. I'll maybe name that percussion effects. We'll just call this percussion. So in percussion, I'll typically add like, like maybe a congo or any type of like rim shot or snare or any type of accent percussion in there. And then the effects is where I like to add like some zap effects or some really cool like ear candy or just some weird effects that wouldn't necessarily be classified with like your traditional organic percussion. So I have those there. And now what I can do is add a couple audio tracks. I'll rename those maybe like hi-hat loop 1, hi-hat loop 2, a couple more, maybe perk loop 1, perk loop 2, and maybe shaker. And again, if you don't want to use all these layers, I like to just have them so they're ready so I don't need to keep creating them, and then if I'm not going to use any of them, you can just easily delete the track. So this way they're just set up for you to be ready. So now I might just group my percussion tracks, all the loops and everything. And then just call those perks. Alright, so that's our drum group. So now you can click on the drums, and I typically make them like a dark blue, but choose whatever colors that you're comfortable with, whatever you're going to recognize very easily and not have to search through your project for what you're looking for. So I'm going to make another MIDI track, and I will call this synths. I've seen a lot of different approaches to different like grouping methods. I prefer to have like a lot of my melodic synths or any type of like instrument that's playing in a synth group, but I know some people will make like a lead group, a bass group. Just take everything in this video with a grain of salt and just do whatever you feel comfortable. So now I have synths. I'll typically group that. Actually, I'll call the group synths. And I'll typically put a couple of instruments on here just to get me started. I'll just call that serum. Now if you have a favorite patch that you like to get going, you can just put that in there and then it'll be ready to go. But I'll just throw serum in there for now. And so every time I open up this project, it will just have serum ready to go. Like I said, you can put any patch that you want in there. You could make a bass group in there, you can make a lead group, whatever you see fit for whatever style of music you like to make. I'm just going to duplicate that. Maybe make a massive track. And I'll duplicate that. And maybe add a contact, because I typically like to have a piano ready just to get like a melodic idea, or just playing with chords, like if I'm just trying to like start an idea or see where I want to go with the track. And my default setting on contact is the grandeur, which is like a really nice grand piano sound, but the one built into Ableton, if you have Suite, is actually really good for a default plugin. I'll just call that piano. And that's typically all I'll do for my synth group, just to start. I usually color mine green, so I'll just make that small. Now I can start with an audio track, and I'll do a main box channel with an audio track, and I'll group that. And I'll duplicate that. And maybe I'll do BG Vox for background Vox. So I'll have like a main kind of hook or verse that I'll put in there. And then background, I'll have any like ad-libs or anything that I might want to add. And I might add one more to do like ambient vox, any type of like really long, drawn out, like soaked in reverb type of vox that really just like fills out the back. Alright, so I have ambient vox, and I'll typically make my vocals a purplish color. And what I did there, if you didn't notice, you can make the group color, and then you do assign track color to group tracks and clips. So once you do that, if you have like any clip in here, it'll also turn it to the color of whatever group color that you select. And for the last group, I'll group that, call that effects, and I'll make a couple tracks on there. I'll do a white noise riser, do crash 1, crash 2, crash effects if I want to have like a wonky, really washed out crash. Riser 1. And riser 2. And I like to make my effects groups white just because typically it's like higher register, and when I think of white I just think of like white noise. So I'll put those down there. I forgot to add on my drum group. What I also like to add is another MIDI track for snare build. So I'll have a couple like big kind of resonant snares that I'll use for a snare build, and I'll just put those in that track. Let me copy over the drum rack onto there, so that'll be ready to go. And you can even add a couple more on there. Now I just added 2 audio tracks for fills in case you have like any like drum fills that you want to put in audio. And I might do one for MIDI, just so if I want to make my own fill with a bunch of different samples, they'll be ready to go. Alright, so now I can close those down. So that's pretty much how I would group a lot of these tracks. So you got your drums, and then all of these groups that are set up with the buses and everything. And like I said, you can put any type of sidechain on here, or any type of compressor that you'd use. Maybe on the synth group you can put like a kickstart or any type of compressor for sidechain, just so it's ready to go. But I won't do that right now. Speaking of sidechain, that also reminded me that I'm going to add one more track up here for when you do choose the sidechain. Just gonna call that sidechain. And I might just make a MIDI track there and grab any type of kick. And for this, it doesn't necessarily need to be a drum rack. For all results. And I think my audio is disabled in Capture and OBS, but this will be fine for now. Just do it on one shot, turn snap off, fade it out a little bit. Doesn't really matter what kick you use as long as like kind of short, because you're just using the trigger for it. And I'll just maybe make that black, and I'll turn it off. You could put that back to unity gain. I can just find C3 where the root is. And like I said, I typically make house music, so my go-to sidechain is 4 to the floor. You might want to do something halftime, but 4 to the floor is a good stock sidechain to have because it, a lot of dance music, regardless of the genre, has that 4 on the floor kind of pumped to it. So I'll just go and put that throughout my song as long as I might think it is. That seems about good. And I can just mute that. Actually, I'm gonna assign the clips there so it's not intrusive. And up here, my default patch, or my default template rather, has all of these locators there for like a standard tech house arrangement. So you can move these around. To make one, you just right click where you see this little speaker icon and you do add locator, and you're able to type whatever you want. So I'm going to delete that here. So typically in a tech house track, you might have like 16 bars of intro, and then a 16 bar like adding the bass, and then you'll go to a break. Move these down a little bit. So these are just a nice reference, or you can make these based on your reference. If you were to like pull a reference track in, you can just add these locators based on whatever track. This isn't necessary for all of your templates. I just like to have them in there, just the standard sections, so that you can just have them ready there to drag wherever your track goes in whatever arrangement that you see fit. So there, got the drop, they'll be there, maybe a breakdown. Have another build there. It's actually kind of a long song. Yeah, the second build or break will probably be a little bit less. That seems about good for now. Can have that outro. Maybe even just shorten that up a little bit. But it just all depends on whatever genre you're making. Alright, so now that we have those set up, we can make some return tracks. And as you can see, my default is guitar rig right here for my reverb, but I'm going to add a couple of stock Ableton plugins there. So I'm going to insert a return track there, and the quick key for that is Control-Alt-T. You can do Control-Alt-T, make another return track, and I'm going to make a couple of those. Make as many or as little as you want. So what a return track is it allows you to send signal from any of the tracks up here. So you can put one reverb on here and send as many tracks to that reverb as you want. So it saves some CPU, but it also it gives you a little more freedom with sending signal to different time-based effects. So you don't have to mess with the dry wet on any of these channels. You can just like affect the send, and it's really good for using like reverb throws and stuff like that to get some cool like transitions into your breakdown. So the first one I'm going to set up is just going to be a reverb. And I have that channel here. And I can use the standard Ableton reverb here. Typically take that off, make it a little bit longer, maybe about 4.5, somewhere around there. The dry wet on all of these effects, you're going to want 100%, because you're controlling the dry wet with the send over here, depending on what effect you send it to. So you always want these, when you put it on a return track, you always want the dry wet to be at 100. And that's a pretty standard. I'll increase the size a little bit. And you could always season this to taste as you're working on your track. This is just like a good starting point. So I'll make this next one 1/8 T delay. So this is like a triplet delay that you hear in a lot of house music. And I'll do the same over here, except we'll call this a quarter delay or a half delay, so it does it like on the offbeat. Now to put the delay on there. So you can use an echo or a filter, delay, or whatever you see fit. So right here by default, it's on the third delay that I was talking about, which is really nice. Or I could just put that to 1/3 for like a triplet, but it's actually like an 1/8 triplet. Now here for the quarter delay, actually I'll turn that to half. I think that'll be a little bit better, more useful. And add that delay to that track, and I'll set that to half. You can even do any type of ping pong, whatever you want. The ping pong might sound cool. And feel free to experiment with these different delay modes. If you don't know what any of them are, you can click this info view and it will tell you what each one does in there. Fade creates a crossfade between the old and the new delay times. So it's really handy. If you don't know what any of these buttons do, you can open the info window right here and it will tell you pretty much about every parameter that's stock in Ableton. Alright, so now I'm going to make a parallel compression. Parallel compressor. Take those out a little bit. I'll just add a compressor on there. I'll turn the ratio up. Oh, that's the live 8 compressor. I like to use the 8 compressor for sidechain. It's a little hard to find, but it's out there because it has a different algorithm and it's not as precise, so it doesn't have that like click when you're pumping pretty heavily. So it's a little more transparent. Yeah, I guess it's just defaulting to there. Whatever, that'll work. So I'll put the ratio up relatively high. 100% dry wet. Can even bring this down a little bit. So what parallel compression is basically compresses a signal very heavily and you mix it with the dry signal, so you have a blend between your dry signal and heavily compressed signal, and it really helps fill out your drums. And so after that you can do any type of effect you want. I might just add either like a room reverb or a maybe like a chorus or something like that you can put your vocals on. And I'll just add both of those, so I'll duplicate that return track. And I'll just call this room verb. So I can't rearrange those. Yeah, so I'll call it there. Delete this one. So there I can do the same thing as the reverb. Reverb down, cut the lows a little bit so it's not as muddy. And this one you're going to want to be like a pretty short reverb. Again, make sure it's 100% wet. Same with the compressor and the delays. Cool. And for this final one, maybe I'll do a chorus or a flanger or something. So that'd be a chorus and 100% wet. And again, you can modify how much you want it to do the effect based on your track and whatever you see fit. As always, you can color code these to whatever you want. I'm okay with these right now. I'll probably end up changing them, but I don't know what colors I really want to put for each one, so I'm not too worried about that right now. Or you can just set them all to, I don't know, yellow or something. Alright, so now on to the master. I typically like to add a limiter just so I'm not like over cranking, and then once I start to mastering I'll just turn that off. So I'll put a limiter on there, and it's really helpful to have a, let's see, where's utilities, just add a utility on there. And I like to have this so you can solo the mono. And a cool tip that you can do is enable the key commands and then click on this mono button there and then press any key you want. I might just do like the number 3. And then you can undo the key command, so every time you press 3 it monos it, so you can quickly reference your mix in mono just to make sure you're not getting phase cancellation when it gets summed back into a mono track. So you can put that on there. Alright, now, is there anything else that we could put on here? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, to put those, you'd put a audio or MIDI track to -10, and then just go and assign to default audio track, so that every time you load a track, it will come out at -10, and will have whatever plugins that you decide that you want to have on your default audio track. Now, all that's left to do is I could save this as a project. So it is helpful to have multiple templates for different genres if you produce a multitude of genres. Ableton 10, if you're still working on Ableton 10, there used to be somewhere in here, whether it was look and feel library, somewhere here that there would be at the very top, it would say save this set as your default template. They now changed this with Ableton 11, so all you have to do is go to File and Save Live Set as default. You just do this, Untitled, and it just kind of saves as a template in there. So I could just call this Teknada template tutorial, and we can see if this will work the same way. So yeah, I'll just save that. And let's try launching Ableton one more time. And there we have it. It loaded up with the set that we just created. And it might take a little bit longer, but that's because it's loading all of those plugins. But it definitely helps you out, increasing workflow and creativity, and lets you just kind of get in here and allows you to just get right to making music. So I hope you learned something. I hope this video helped. And subscribe for more tutorials, and I'll catch you in the next one.